Holy shit, these humans are lunatics. Look at the size of that warship. Please tell me this is some sick joke. We're all gonna die. The Bolian ensign screamed, mandibles clattering together in fear at the sight of the massive human vessel looming in orbit. Sci-Father's blue skin blanched to an ashen cyan as the terrifyingly huge human warship TSN Endeavour blotted out the sun, 15 million metric tons of battle armor and unimaginable destructive power, bristling with heinous alien weapons. It dwarfed the diminutive Bolian fleet, the largest ships like toy skiffs next to a Leviathan. Sci-Father gulped, turning to his advisors. He spoke with a tremor. They claimed to come in peace, with a ship so big it could glass our entire planet in an hour. Grand Vizier Brolos shook his head grimly. Our long-range scans reveal thousands more of these monstrous ships in their territory, tens of thousands, and they're all even bigger than this one. Panic and horror rippled through the Bolian command center. Hushed prayers for divine salvation, mixed with choked gasps and whimpers. They were completely at the mercy of these insanely advanced humans, their overwhelming naval supremacy hanging like a blade over the necks of the entire Bolian race. Lieutenant Commander Jeremy Cook felt queasy as the shuttle descended through the atmosphere, the sprawling Bolian capital coming into view, gleaming towers juxtaposed with quaint stone temples. The raw terror on the faces of the Bolian greeting party as they craned their necks up at the Endeavour told him everything. The humans weren't here to negotiate as equals. Their very presence was an unintentional act of intimidation on a planetary scale, an unspoken ultimatum: submit or be crushed under the metal boots of human military might. Jeremy prayed the Bolians wouldn't react with irrational fear and lash out. He knew his ship could annihilate their entire species with a single barrage if provoked. The horrific destructive capacity of mankind's incomprehensible weapons technology made him shudder. One wrong move, one spark of aggression, and billions of lives would be snuffed out in an instant. Jeremy steadied himself, determined to establish a fragile peace, the survival of an entire civilization balanced on a razor's edge. He plastered on a forced grin as the shuttle touched down, marching out to greet the ashen-faced Sire-Father with an outstretched hand. "Greetings, Sire-Father. It's an honor to finally meet you in person. I can assure you our impressive ship is only for defensive purposes. We come in friendship, in the spirit of cooperation between our great peoples." Jeremy could only hope the Bolians wouldn't call humanity's bluff. He held his breath, knowing that every word, every gesture could spell salvation or doomsday for an entire species wholly unprepared to face the sheer magnitude of mankind's military supremacy. The feast was a tense affair, with the Bolians shooting nervous glances at Jeremy and his crew. Jeremy tried to break the ice, discussing human culture and the technological wonders of Earth. But Sire-Father seemed on edge, his eyes darting between Jeremy and the massive human ship, visible through the palace windows. "Tell me, Commander Cook, what exactly is the purpose of your endeavor? Why has the human military come to our humble world with such a show of force?" Sire-Father asked, mandibles quivering. Jeremy smiled disarmingly. "I assure you, Sire-Father, the TSN is a peacekeeping armada above all else. The Endeavour is simply one of many ships we have patrolling the galaxy, maintaining stability and order. We only wish to open friendly relations with your people." Rather than reassured, the Bolians looked even more unsettled by this revelation. Hushed whispers rippled through the gathered officials as they came to grips with the sheer scale of human military might. Jeremy strained to overhear snatches of urgent conversation. "Threat to our sovereignty. Find a way to defend ourselves, at the mercy of these aliens." Suddenly, a deafening boom shook the palace, the windows rattling in their frames. Screams of terror and the high-pitched whine of energy weapons echoed from the city below. Jeremy bolted from his chair, hand flying to his sidearm, as Sire-Father and the Bolian officials leapt to their feet in panic. Racing outside, Jeremy was greeted by a scene of chaos. Unknown assailants clad in black armor were rampaging through the streets, cutting down civilians with blasts of searing plasma. The weapons they wielded looked chillingly familiar, the same sleek lines and blue glow as TSN issue rifles. Jeremy and his crew took cover behind a low wall, returning fire at the attackers. Sire-Father cowered beside them, eyes wide with fear and confusion. As the battle raged, a horrible realization dawned on Jeremy. The attackers moved with military precision, their tactics bearing the unmistakable hallmarks of human training. Could someone from his own delegation be behind this unprovoked assault? The implications were dire. If the Bolians believed humanity had betrayed their trust and attacked their people, it could spark an interstellar war. Jeremy gritted his teeth, plasma bolts sizzling overhead. Somehow he had to unravel the truth of this attack and prevent the tenuous peace between mankind and the Bolians from crumbling. The fate of two species hung in the balance. As the dust settled, Jeremy and Sire-Father emerged from their cover, surveying the aftermath of the sudden attack. The once bustling streets were now littered with rubble and the bodies of fallen Bolians. The attackers, their mission apparently complete, had vanished as quickly as they had appeared. Jeremy knelt beside one of the fallen assailants, examining their armor and weapons more closely. The design was undeniably similar to TSN gear, but with subtle differences, a slightly different color scheme, modified insignia. It was clear these weren't standard-issue human weapons. Sire-Father, his face a mask of grief and rage, turned to Jeremy. "Commander Cook, what is the meaning of this? Your people come to our world in peace and then attack our very capital." Jeremy shook his head, his mind racing. "Sire-Father, I swear to you, this was not the doing of my crew or the TSN. Look at their armor. It's similar to ours, but not quite the same. Someone is trying to frame us." Just then, a group of Bolian soldiers approached, led by a grizzled, battle-scarred officer. Sire-Father turned to face them, his voice trembling with barely contained fury. "General Zoltar, what have you to report on this unprovoked attack?" The general, his eyes gleaming with a strange light, stepped forward. "Sire-Father, I have reason to believe this attack was the work of the humans. My sources have been monitoring their activities, and it's clear they have designs on our world. This was a preemptive strike, an attempt to destabilize our government and pave the way for conquest." Jeremy stepped forward, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "General Zoltar, I can assure you that TSN had no part in this attack. We came to your world in friendship, not conquest." Zoltar sneered, his hand resting on the hilt of his plasma sword. "Empty words, human. Your kind has shown its true colors today. This is an act of war, and we will respond in kind." Jeremy, his heart pounding, activated his comlink. "TSN Endeavour, this is Lieutenant Commander Cook. We have a situation planetside, possible false flag operation, requesting immediate backup and extraction." There was a crackle of static. Then the voice of Captain Alexandra Novak filled his ear. "Commander Cook, this is Endeavour. We read you, but we're unable to provide assistance at this time. The ship has been sabotaged. Our systems are down. You're on your own for now." Jeremy felt a chill run down his spine. Sabotage. First the attack, now this. He looked around at the Bolian soldiers, Zoltar, even Sire-Father. Someone here was working against them, but who? And to what end? He turned to Sire-Father, his voice low and urgent. "Sire-Father, I know how this looks, but I give you my word. My people are not behind this. Someone is trying to turn our species against each other. We need to find out who and why before this escalates into full-scale war." Sire-Father hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Very well, Commander Cook. Let us retire to my private chambers. We have much to discuss, and I fear we are surrounded by enemies on all sides." As they made their way back to the palace, Jeremy's mind raced. Who was this syndicate Zoltar had mentioned? What was their agenda? And how deep did this conspiracy run? One thing was certain. Time was running out. If they couldn't unravel this web of intrigue and betrayal quickly, both their species would pay the price. The fate of humanity and the Bolians alike hung in the balance. As Jeremy and Sire-Father slipped into the dingy back alleys of the Bolian capital, the thud of military boots echoed behind them. Wanted posters plastered the grimy walls, their faces staring back, the human terrorist and the Bolian traitor. They ducked into a seedy tavern, the air thick with smoke and the sour stench of cheap liquor. In a dimly lit back room, a group of Bolians hunched over glowing computer terminals, lines of neon code flashing across the screens. The leader, a wiry male with electric blue eyes, looked up as they entered. "You're the human and the sire father," he said, mandibles clicking. "We've been expecting you." Jeremy and sire father exchanged a glance. "You're the ghostwriters?" Jeremy asked. The hacker nodded. "We've been monitoring the syndicate's activities. They're not just a criminal organization. They're a cabal of wealthy elites from both our species, manipulating events behind the scenes." He tapped a few keys, and a hologram flickered to life, showing a web of connections between human and Bolian politicians, industrialists, and military leaders. "The attack on the capital, the sabotage of your ship, it's all part of their plan to spark a war and line their pockets with the profits." Jeremy's heart raced as he studied the hologram. The syndicate's tendrils reached to the highest levels of the TSN, even the Endeavour's crew. "We can't trust anyone," he muttered, "but we have to expose the truth." The ghostwriter's mandibles twitched in a Bolian smile. "Leave that to us." Hours later, on the bridge of the Endeavour, Captain Novak watched in horror as every screen flared to life, broadcasting a torrent of damning evidence: secret syndicate meetings, bank transfers, recorded conversations, the syndicate's plot laid bare for all to see. Across Bolos Prime, the broadcast sparked chaos. In the halls of power, syndicate agents scrambled to cover their tracks, turning on each other in a desperate bid for self-preservation. But in the skies above, a new threat loomed. A fleet of Bolian warships, led by the zealous General Zoltar, surged towards the Endeavour, weapons primed. Zoltar's face, twisted with rage, filled the viewscreen. "Surrender, humans," he bellowed. "You will pay for your treachery." On the planet below, Jeremy and Sirefather raced through the streets, the wail of sirens and the rumble of distant explosions filling the air. They had to reach the Endeavour, had to stop the battle before it was too late. But as they rounded a corner, they skidded to a halt, plasma rifles leveled at their faces. A group of syndicate operatives, both human and Bolian, emerged from the shadows, weapons trained on the fugitives. "End of the line," the lead operative sneered. "The syndicate sends its regards." Plasma bolts sizzled through the air as Jeremy and Sirefather dove for cover, the fate of two worlds hanging by a thread. The battle for the truth had begun, and the future of human-Bolian relations, the future of both their species, would be decided here, on the blood-soaked streets of the Bolian capital. Plasma bolts sizzled overhead as Jeremy and Sirefather darted through the shadows, the stolen shuttle waiting just ahead. They clambered aboard, punching in the access codes obtained from their ghostwriter allies. The shuttle shuddered to life, lifting off from the blood-soaked streets and streaking towards the looming bulk of the Endeavour. As they docked, the shuttle bay was eerily quiet, the usual bustle of crew and machinery replaced by an unsettling stillness. Jeremy and Sirefather crept through the dimly lit corridors, the only sound the hum of the ship's engines and the pounding of their own hearts. They burst onto the bridge, plasma rifles raised. Captain Novak whirled around, her face a mask of shock and anger. "Commander Cook, what the hell are you doing?" she demanded. Jeremy kept his weapon trained on the captain, his voice steady. "It's over, Novak. We know about the syndicate, about the sabotage, the false flag attack. Stand down, and let's end this before more lives are lost." Novak's eyes narrowed, her hand drifting towards her sidearm. "I don't know what you're talking about." Suddenly the bridge doors hissed open, and a group of armed men stormed in, led by a tall, broad-shouldered human with cold, calculating eyes. "Well done, Commander Cook," he said, his voice smooth and mocking. "You've unraveled our little conspiracy, but I'm afraid you're too late." Sirefather hissed, mandibles flaring. "Who are you?" The man smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Marcus Reeves, at your service, and I'm afraid I can't let you interfere with our plans." Reeves nodded to his men, who raised their weapons. Jeremy and Sirefather dove for cover as plasma bolts scorched the air. The bridge dissolved into chaos, consoles exploding in showers of sparks, the stench of ozone thick in the air. Jeremy returned fire, dropping one of Reeves's men with a well-placed shot. Sire-Father leapt from cover to cover, his plasma sword flashing as he cut down another. But there were too many, and they were being driven back, forced into the corridors. They fought their way through the ship, ducking into maintenance shafts and service tunnels, trying to shake their pursuers. The sound of boots on metal echoed through the passageways as Reeves's men hunted them. In the dim red emergency lighting, Jeremy spotted a flashing display on a bulkhead. His blood ran cold as he read the schematic, the location of the Syndicate's bombs, the engineering section, the reactor core. He grabbed Sire-Father's arm, pulling him close. "We have to get to engineering. They're going to blow the ship. Frame your people for it." Sire-Father nodded grimly. "Then let's move." They plunged deeper into the bowels of the ship, the air growing hotter, the passageways narrower. The clang of metal on metal, the hiss of steam, the thrumming of the engines grew louder with each step. Ahead, a group of Reeves' men blocked their path, weapons drawn. Jeremy and Sire-Father exchanged a glance, a silent understanding passing between them. They charged, plasma bolts filling the air, the smell of burnt metal and seared flesh choking their lungs. Jeremy felt a searing pain as a bolt grazed his arm, but he pushed forward, slamming the butt of his rifle into a Syndicate agent's face. Sire-Father was a blur of motion, his plasma sword humming as it sliced through armor and bone. They fought with a desperate fury, knowing that every second brought them closer to annihilation. At last they stood before the engineering bay doors, the bodies of their foes scattered behind them. Jeremy's hands shook as he worked the controls, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The doors slid open, revealing a cavernous space filled with pulsing machinery and the hellish glow of the reactor core. And there, in the shadows, the ominous shapes of the Syndicate's bombs, their timers ticking down towards zero. Jeremy and Sire-Father raced into the chamber, sweat pouring down their faces, hearts hammering in their chests. The fate of two worlds, the lives of billions, hung in the balance. They had to succeed, had to stop the Syndicate's mad plan. But as they approached the bombs, a figure stepped from the shadows, a cruel smile on his face. Marcus Reeves, his eyes glinting with malice, his weapon aimed squarely at their hearts. "End of the line, gentlemen," he said, his finger tightening on the trigger. "The Syndicate sends its regards." Jeremy lunged for the first bomb, fingers shaking as he pried open the casing. Sire-Father stood guard, plasma sword held at the ready, eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. A flurry of plasma bolts sizzled past Jeremy's head and he ducked, heart pounding. Reeves emerged from the darkness, a cruel smirk on his face, prototype weapon glowing an ominous blue. "You really thought it would be that easy?" Reeves taunted, circling them like a predator toying with its prey. Jeremy gritted his teeth, rising to his feet. "It's over, Reeves. We're stopping this here and now." Reeves laughed, a cold, mirthless sound that echoed through the chamber. "You're too late. The Syndicate's plan is already in motion. When these bombs go off, the Bolians will be blamed, and your precious TSN will have no choice but to retaliate." He fired again, the plasma bolt searing the air inches from Sire-Father's face. The Bolian leader hissed, mandibles flaring in anger. Jeremy and Sire-Father dove for cover as Reeves advanced, the whine of his weapon charging for another shot. They scrambled through the twisting maze of pipes and conduits, the heat of the reactor core searing their skin. Jeremy's mind raced as they ran, guilt and doubt gnawing at his insides. How much of this was his fault? His role in the TSN's expansion, the military might he'd helped build. Had it all led to this moment, this teetering on the brink of galactic war? Beside him, Sire-Father's face was a mask of grim determination, but Jeremy could see the fear in his eyes, the weight of an entire species' fate resting on his shoulders, the knowledge that one wrong move could mean the end of the Bolian way of life. A plasma bolt sizzled past, close enough to singe Jeremy's hair. Reeves was getting closer, his shots more precise. They were running out of time and places to hide. Jeremy spotted a narrow maintenance shaft, barely wide enough for a man to crawl through. He grabbed Sire-Father's arm, pulling him towards it. "In here!" They clambered into the cramped tunnel, the metal walls pressing in on them from all sides. Behind them they could hear Reeves's footsteps, the clang of his boots on the grating getting louder. The shaft opened into a small chamber, a dead end. Jeremy's heart sank as he realized they were trapped, cornered like rats in a maze. Sire-Father readied his plasma sword, the blue glow of the blade casting eerie shadows on the walls. Reeves's silhouette filled the entrance to the chamber, his weapon leveled at them. "Nowhere left to run," he sneered. "The Syndicate thanks you for your service." Jeremy closed his eyes, bracing himself for the searing heat of the plasma bolt, but instead he heard a clatter, the sound of something metal skittering across the floor. His eyes snapped open to see a small spherical device rolling towards them, blinking red. A grenade. "Get down!" he yelled, tackling Sire-Father to the ground. The grenade detonated, filling the chamber with a blinding flash and a deafening boom. Shrapnel pinged off the walls, slicing through Jeremy's uniform, drawing blood. Ears ringing, vision swimming, Jeremy staggered to his feet. Reeves was gone, the smoke from the grenade curling in his wake. Sire-Father coughed, wiping blood from a cut on his forehead. "We have to keep moving, the final bomb." Jeremy nodded, pushing down the pain and the fear. They couldn't stop, not now, not with so much at stake. They stumbled from the chamber, retracing their steps through the labyrinthine passageways. The clock was ticking, the fate of 2 worlds hanging in the balance. At last they reached the final junction, the last explosive device looming before them. Jeremy's hands were slick with sweat as he knelt beside it, examining the tangle of wires and circuitry. A plasma bolt sizzled overhead, scorching the wall behind them. Reeves had found them again, his relentless pursuit never ending. Jeremy worked feverishly, his mind racing through the bomb disposal protocols he'd learned in training. Cut the red wire, bypass the failsafe, pray to whatever gods were listening. Sire-Father deflected another plasma bolt with his sword, the air crackling with ozone. "Hurry, Jeremy, he's getting closer." Jeremy's fingers danced over the wires, his breath coming in ragged gasps. One wrong move, one miscalculation, and it would all be over. The bomb's timer blinked, the seconds ticking down, 3, 2, 1. With a final desperate yank, Jeremy severed the last wire. The timer froze, the lights on the device fading to black. He let out a shuddering breath, his heart hammering against his ribs. But there was no time to celebrate. Reeves was upon them, his face twisted with rage. He leveled his weapon at Jeremy, finger tightening on the trigger. "You think you've won?" he snarled. "You think you can stop the Syndicate? We're everywhere, in every corner of the galaxy. Cut off one head and 2 more will take its place." Jeremy spat blood and glared at Reeves. "You're insane, Reeves. You won't get away with this." Reeves laughed harshly, plasma rifle never wavering. "You still don't get it, do you, Commander? I already have." He stalked forward, eyes glittering with malice. "The TSN took everything from me. My home, my family, my future, and for what? So you could expand your precious empire? Well, now it's my turn. The Syndicate will bring the TSN to its knees, and I'll be there to watch it burn." Jeremy's eyes darted to the shadows behind Reeves. Movement, the glint of metal. His blood ran cold. They weren't alone. Syndicate agents poured from the darkness, weapons raised. They were surrounded, hopelessly outnumbered. Jeremy's mind raced, desperate for a way out. His gaze fell on a power conduit pulsing with energy. If he could overload it, cause a surge. It was a desperate gamble, but they had no choice. Jeremy lunged, slamming his fist into the conduit. Electricity arced, sparks showering. The room plunged into darkness. Chaos erupted. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air, the stench of ozone choking. Jeremy rolled, dodging a barrage of shots. Beside him, Sire-Father sprang into action, a blur of blue skin and gleaming sword. In the strobing emergency lights, Jeremy saw Sire-Father reach Reeves, saw the flash of a blade. Reeves howled, his rifle clattering to the deck. Sire-Father scooped up the final bomb, clutching it to his chest. "Jeremy, I have it. We need to go now." Jeremy nodded, blinking sweat from his eyes. They sprinted for the exit, plasma bolts scorching the bulkheads around them. But the Syndicate agents were relentless. They blocked the passageway, a wall of guns and armor. Jeremy and Sire-Father skidded to a halt, chests heaving. The lead agent grinned, teeth flashing in the dark. "Drop the bomb, alien, it's over." Jeremy's mind whirled. Surrender and the Syndicate's plan would succeed. Billions would die, but fight and they'd be cut down where they stood, the bomb taken anyway. Sire-Father's eyes met his, a question in their depths. Jeremy swallowed hard, mind racing. An impossible choice, with the fate of worlds in the balance. Behind them the reactor pulsed, the bomb's timer ticking down. Seconds left, time slipping away like sand through fingers. The moment hung suspended, stretched taut. The Syndicate agents tensed, fingers tightening on triggers. Jeremy's breath caught in his throat. Trapped between the reactor and a wall of guns, death on every side. The hardest choice of his life and no time left to make it. Jeremy and Sire-Father exchanged a final desperate glance. And then, as the timer hit 0, all hell broke loose. In a flash, Jeremy and Sire-Father dove for cover as the Syndicate agents opened fire, plasma bolts sizzling through the air. Jeremy rolled behind a console, heart pounding, adrenaline surging. He popped up, squeezing off a burst from his rifle, dropping an agent with a shot to the chest. Across the room, Sire-Father leapt and spun. His plasma soared a blur of blue light as he deflected shots and cut down agents with precision strikes. His mandibles flared in a battle cry as he pushed forward, driving the Syndicate back. Jeremy ducked as a plasma bolt scorched the wall above his head. He grabbed a fallen agent's grenade, priming it and lobbing it towards a cluster of Syndicate troops. The explosion rocked the room, smoke and debris raining down. "Sire-Father," Jeremy shouted over the chaos, "we need to move, head for the hangar bay." The Bolian leader nodded, slicing through another agent as he fought his way to Jeremy's side. Together they burst through the doors, racing down the corridor as the ship shook around them. Alarms blared, emergency lights flashing red. The deck bucked beneath their feet as distant explosions rumbled through the hull. The Syndicate had triggered the self-destruct. They were trying to bury the evidence and everyone on board. Jeremy gritted his teeth as they ran, dodging falling debris and sparking conduits. The Endeavour was tearing itself apart, the once proud ship now a death trap. They had to get off, had to find a way to expose the Syndicate's treachery before it was too late. Sire-Father skidded to a halt at a junction, consulting a schematic on his wrist display. "This way," he hissed, pointing down a side passage, "a maintenance shaft. It'll bypass the main corridors, get us to the hangar faster." Jeremy nodded, following Sire-Father into the cramped tunnel. They crawled on hands and knees, the metal walls groaning and creaking around them as the ship's structure strained. Suddenly, a shadow fell across the shaft's exit. Jeremy's blood ran cold as a familiar figure stepped into view, blocking their path. Marcus Reeves, battered but alive, a cruel smirk on his face. "Going somewhere?" Reeves sneered, leveling his rifle at them. "I told you, Commander, the Syndicate always wins." Jeremy and Sire-Father exchanged a glance, a wordless message passing between them. No more running, no more hiding. This ended here, one way or another. As the ship crumbled and burned around them, the three combatants faced off, weapons drawn, the fate of worlds hanging in the balance. The final showdown had begun, a desperate struggle against the odds, with time itself as their enemy. Jeremy slammed Reeves into the bulkhead, forearm pressed against his throat. "It's over, Reeves. Your plan failed." Reeves laughed, a hoarse, choking sound. "You think this is the end? The Syndicate's reach extends far beyond this ship, this conflict. We're manipulating events across the galaxy, pulling the strings of fate itself." The ship shuddered violently, throwing them to the deck. Reeves grinned maniacally as Jeremy hauled him up by his collar. "You can't stop what's coming. A new order will rise from the ashes of your precious Federation, and the Syndicate will rule it all." Sire-Father grabbed Jeremy's arm. "We have to go now. This whole place is coming apart." Jeremy nodded grimly, shoving Reeves aside. They sprinted through the disintegrating corridors, leaping over twisted metal and sparking wires. Behind them, Reeves's mocking laughter echoed through the chaos. The hangar bay was a maelstrom of fire and debris. Syndicate agents lay strewn across the deck, caught in the explosions ripping through the ship. Jeremy and Sci-Fi leapt into the nearest shuttle, slamming the hatches closed as the Endeavour disintegrated around them. Jeremy punched the thrusters, the tiny craft rocketing out of the hangar seconds before it collapsed in a roiling fireball. The shockwave slammed into them, sending the shuttle tumbling end over end. Sci-Fi clung to his harness, eyes wide as the Endeavour exploded in a blinding flash, the once mighty ship reduced to an expanding cloud of debris. Jeremy fought the controls, wrestling the shuttle back on course. His mind reeled with the implications of Reeves's final words: the Syndicate, a galaxy-spanning conspiracy, an insidious plot to reshape the very fabric of galactic society. He glanced at Sci-Fi, the Bolian leader's face grim. "We have to warn them, the TSN, the Bolian government, hell, everyone." Sci-Fi nodded. "We need proof, hard evidence, and somewhere safe to regroup and plan our next move." Jeremy brought up the nav computer, scanning for the nearest neutral port, a remote space station, a waypoint for freighters and traders on the edge of the neutral zone. There Sigma Orionis 9, independent, outside TSN or Bolian jurisdiction. We can lay low, make some discreet calls. He laid in the course, the shuttle's engines thrumming as they accelerated into the void. But even as the wreckage of the Endeavour faded behind them, Jeremy couldn't shake the prickling sense of being watched. On the shuttle's aft sensors, a flicker of movement, the ghostly silhouette of a ship sliding out of cloak. The hull markings were unmistakable, the angular sigil of the Syndicate. The first plasma bolt slammed into their shields, alarms blaring. Jeremy wrenched the shuttle into a desperate corkscrew, juking and weaving as the Syndicate ship bore down on them, weapons blazing. "They must have tracked us from the Endeavour," Sci-Fi shouted over the scream of the alarms. Jeremy gritted his teeth, throwing the shuttle into a gut-wrenching dive. "Damn it, the station's still too far. We'll never make it like this." Another hit, sparks spraying from overloaded conduits. The shuttle's systems flickered, engines sputtering. The fuel gauge blinked an angry red, their reserves dwindling fast under the strain of combat maneuvers. Jeremy and Sci-Fi exchanged a desperate look, the Syndicate ship looming on the view screen, its guns swiveling to lock on for a final, killing salvo. They were out of options, out of time. The only question was which would get them first, the Syndicate's guns or the cold, merciless vacuum of space. As the enemy ship charged its weapons for one last devastating volley, Jeremy knew that the next few seconds would decide not just their fate, but the fate of the entire galaxy itself. Jeremy's fingers flew over the shuttle's controls, sweat beading on his brow as he poured every ounce of fuel into the engines. The battered craft shuddered and groaned, pushed to its limits as it hurtled towards the distant space station. Behind them, the Syndicate ship loomed, its weapons glowing with deadly intent. Plasma bolts sizzled past, scorching the shuttle's hull. Alarms blared, warning of imminent shield failure. Sci-Fi gripped the armrests, his mandibles tight with tension. "We're not going to make it," he hissed through clenched teeth. Jeremy shook his head, his eyes locked on the rapidly approaching station. "We have to. We're the only ones who know the truth. The only ones who can stop the Syndicate." Suddenly, a flurry of bright flashes erupted around the Syndicate vessel. Jeremy blinked, hardly daring to believe his eyes. A squadron of Bolian warships had appeared as if from nowhere, their sleek, angular hulls bristling with weapons. The Syndicate ship veered away, its shields flaring under the onslaught. The Bolian ships pressed their attack, a barrage of plasma and missiles hammering the enemy vessel. Jeremy let out a shaky breath, his heart pounding. "The Bolians, they got our distress call. They came for us." Sci-Fi's eyes widened, a glimmer of hope flashing across his face. "They're giving us a chance. We have to take it." With the last dregs of fuel, Jeremy guided the shuttle towards the station's docking bay. The craft shuddered as it passed through the atmospheric containment field, landing gear slamming onto the deck with a bone-jarring thud. The shuttle's hatch hissed open, revealing a contingent of human and Bolian officials, their faces etched with a mix of concern and determination. Jeremy and Sirefather stumbled out, exhausted but resolute. "We have evidence," Jeremy said, his voice hoarse. "The syndicate, the conspiracy, it's all here." He held out a data chip, the product of their desperate flight and narrow escape. The officials exchanged glances, the gravity of the situation sinking in. "We need to see this immediately," a human commander said, taking the chip. "If what you say is true—" Sirefather nodded grimly. "It is, and we don't have much time. The syndicate's influence runs deep. They'll stop at nothing to bury this." As the authorities pored over the evidence, Jeremy and Sirefather watched the battle raging outside the station's viewports. The Bolian ships fought valiantly, but the syndicate vessel was a formidable foe, its advanced weapons cutting through shields and hulls alike. Suddenly a chime sounded from a nearby console. Jeremy frowned, moving to investigate. His blood ran cold as he read the message scrolling across the screen. "They know," he whispered, his voice trembling. "The syndicate. They know we're here. They're coming for us." Sirefather's eyes narrowed, his hand drifting to the plasma pistol at his hip. "Then we make our stand here. We buy time for the authorities to act on the evidence." Jeremy nodded, a new resolve hardening in his chest. They had come too far, sacrificed too much to let the syndicate win now. As the station's alarms began to blare, warning of incoming hostiles, Jeremy and Sirefather took up positions by the docking bay doors. They exchanged a glance, a silent acknowledgement of the battle to come. The fight for the galaxy's future had only just begun, and they would meet it head-on no matter the cost. The doors shuddered under a barrage of heavy weapons fire, the syndicate's assault teams breaching the station's outer defenses. Jeremy and Sirefather braced themselves, weapons raised, as the first wave of enemies poured into the docking bay. Plasma bolts crisscrossed the space, the air thick with the acrid stench of ozone. Jeremy dropped 2 syndicate soldiers with precise shots, ducking behind a cargo crate as return fire sizzled overhead. Sirefather leapt into the fray, his plasma sword a blur of blue light as he cut down attackers with deadly grace. His mandibles flared in a battle cry, rallying the station's defenders to push back against the onslaught. In the chaos of battle, Jeremy caught a glimpse of a familiar figure through the smoke and flashing lights. Marcus Reeves, his face a mask of cold determination, leading the syndicate's forces deeper into the station. Jeremy's grip tightened on his weapon, a surge of anger and betrayal flooding through him. Reeves, the man who had once been his friend, his mentor, now revealed as a traitor and a monster. He pushed forward, fighting his way through the melee, Sirefather at his side. They had to reach Reeves, had to end this once and for all. But even as they battled on, Jeremy couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The syndicate's tendrils ran deep, its influence far-reaching and insidious. Rooting out the corruption, the rot at the heart of the galaxy, would be a long and perilous road. And yet, as he saw the human and Bolian forces fighting side by side, united in common cause, he felt a flicker of hope. Together, they had a chance. Together, they could stand against the darkness, no matter the odds. The station shook under the impact of heavy weapons, the syndicate's ships renewing their assault from outside. Jeremy and Sirefather exchanged a grim look, knowing that time was running out. They had to hold the line, had to buy the authorities the precious minutes they needed to secure the evidence and spread the truth far and wide. The galaxy's fate hung in the balance, and they would not let it fall. Not while they still drew breath, not while they still had strength to fight. With a roar of defiance, Jeremy and Sirefather charged back into the fray, their weapons blazing, their hearts alight with the fire of justice. The battle raged on, a desperate struggle against the forces of tyranny and deceit. They would fight, they would bleed, they would sacrifice, for the galaxy, for the future, for the promise of a tomorrow free from the syndicate's shadow. And though the road ahead was shrouded in darkness, Though the enemies arrayed against them were vast and many, they knew one thing with crystal clarity. As long as they stood together, as long as the spark of hope still burned in their hearts, the light would never truly be extinguished. The syndicate could be beaten. The truth could prevail. And they would fight for that truth, that hope, that future, until their last breath, their last drop of blood. For in the end it was all they had, and it was enough, it had to be enough. The fate of the galaxy, the fate of all they held dear, depended on it. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.